else would better exemplify the spirit of a global movement than our esteemed speaker, Ms. Leymah Gbowee. I will have to give a very personal account of the first time that I set eyes on Ms. Leymah Gbowee. She's a force to be reckoned with. It was in 2011, I was in New York at the Women in the World conference, and I was in this darkened auditorium at the Lincoln Center. And Ms. Gbowee was on the stage speaking passionately, with candor, humor, but this fierceness of spirit that was electric. I just sat there and I said, this is a remarkable woman. I need to get to know her. And I have to say that when women have that kind of presence, when they have that kind of magnetic presence, you know that there's this raging beam of light that goes through them, and they're a vehicle for something much bigger, a cause much bigger. And of course, I know that Ms. Gbowee will be speaking about her experiences. What really touched me at the core is, here is a woman who was an abused wife, who was a refugee, that had really experienced and witnessed the tremendous horror of a civil war in her country of Liberia, and how this incredible woman, who at one time felt so helpless, after her fourth child, she set about this incredible transformation that was not only a personal transformation, but her personal work really changed everybody, all these women in her country. It is no joke to be able, that tremendous force and vision, to be able to form an interfaith coalition in a country and bring the women and the mothers of Liberia together to stand with a united voice, and which is, we want peace. We want peace. And of course, on Friday, I had the honor of speaking to Ms. Gbowee for a few minutes, and I was talking about my background being Iranian, and I'm also Jewish. So in Yiddish, we have a word called chutzpah. And chutzpah means fierceness, bravery. And who would think that a woman would have this tremendous chutzpah to take a group of her women and hold negotiators hostage, so-called hostage, but by forming a ring around the exit door so nobody could leave, to make sure that those negotiators, after weeks and weeks of going and coming and coming and going back, would sit there and form some sort of resolution. That's what she did. I just want to end with one final note. And this reminds me of another person who I hold in such high esteem, and that is Maya Angelou. Oprah once did an interview with Maya, and she asked her, what is it about you that when you come in a room, you demand attention? You get such respect and you have such presence. And I will read off what she said. She said, when I come in a room, I bring with myself the history as an African American woman, as a Jewish woman, as a Muslim woman, and everything I have known and all the stories I have heard from all women. So, when I come into a room, I bring with myself everything good, strong, kind, and powerful to every situation. So actually, when I walk into the room, it's just not Maya coming into the room. I bring 2,000 other women with me. And this is exactly the spirit of Ms. Gbowee, that she brings the stories of thousands and thousands of women with her, and she can make such an impact in the world. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Please have your seats. This is supposed to be a very casual girl time. Enjoy yourself, have fun. I'd first like to recognize my sister who's in the room, Susan Lord. Susan, just wave. Susan, she's on this side. She heard that I was in Los Angeles, and she's a friend of my sister, Abigail Disney. So since I started, I've been working around the world. My children asked me when they were much younger, Mama, how many aunties do we have? I said, well, you have aunties from China, India, wherever else in the world. Every woman activist is your auntie. And the reason they were asking this question was because there was this time in December in 2008 that Abby, Gloria Steinem, and the whole group decided to come to Ghana to visit. And so imagine Gloria Steinem in our living room in this tiny 3-bedroom house in Ghana, and everyone has to say, hi, Auntie Gloria. And in their young minds, they couldn't understand, how is she auntie? But anyway, so just as my kids have aunties that are from different races, I have nieces and nephews from different races too, and I really take pleasure in my extended relatives. So thank you, Suzanne, for coming. It's been a journey. I've been on a journey, and recently I decided to do the academic thing because I think I was going crazy with all of the thing in my mind. I needed to pass it on to people. So coming to Barnard, I had to bring my 5-year-old. She was like 3.5 at the time when we came. And over the last few years and months, I am as African as it gets. You see how I dress and the way I carry myself. And this little girl is turning into so much of an American that, oh Lord, I can't stand her. And my kids, sometimes they try to bring me to the place where they want mama to be, part of the trending thing. So one of the days they said to me, Mama, we went to a store and we went to visit my other daughter who's going to school in New Hampshire. And they said, let's go and buy you a bathing suit. I said, geez, I haven't been in a bathing suit since I was 90 pounds. And they said, oh, Mama, you look good. And my husband is just looking at me like, do you really want to do that? Anyway, we go to the store, we buy this bathing suit, and we get home. I put it on to the hotel, and they said, come and go and take a swim. I said, really? I said, Mama, you'll do great. I have this daughter who's a junior at Mount Holyoke, and the one who's at school in New Hampshire, and the baby had all her floaters on, and I jumped in that pool and went straight under. And every time I came up to take air, I would see my husband crying from laughter. My daughters, they're looking for cell phone because this is a very good moment to remind you. And my 5-year-old swims towards me and holds my hand, and I'm clinging to this baby for my life. Afterwards, we went up to the room, and she's gorging on chocolate and candy. And like, Moke, stop. Too much sweet for one night. We need to sleep. You get high on sugar. And she's gorging. So I finally get fed up and I scream, stop it. And she turned and looked at me, Mama, you screaming at me? I just saved your life. My husband looked at me and said, you look for it. But for the next 2 weeks, I could not reprimand the child because I was always reminded I was in a state of going to die, and she saved my life. So having 6 children, people say, how do you do it? I say, well, the one thing that we've established is that I am the boss. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that you're not my friend. I'm the parent. And the third thing is that you can only have an opinion when you start writing the check. And you speak when I ask you to speak. Yes. And we've had a very nice relationship because it has been established that there is no democracy in my house. Even though there are no human rights violations, according to me, but you don't do democracy with children. I grew up in a very unique community. My grandmother, who's over 100, is the first feminist that I met in my life. My mother was very young when she had us. She met my dad at 15, and he was 25. And she had her first child at 16. And then another child followed, and another child followed, and her family got upset that he was this poor boy that she decided to waste her life on. So our grandmother, who had at her time been married 3 times, and by Liberian standard, for someone who did not go to school, she's well off because she has a farm and several properties and a house in Monrovia. So she decided every time my mother had one child, she took us in. So I was number 4. And we lived with Ma. And Ma, at one point, when my dad finally got a job, we all moved in their house, which was just next door. So we didn't go very far. She moved on a farm because then my mother would take care of us. But as we were growing up, we had 4 cousins who were boys, and we were 4 girls at the time. If you went to Ma and say one of the boys punched me, she'll tell you go back and fight. And the question she would ask you is, do you have a brother to fight for you? And the answer was no. So why are you coming to me crying? You all need to learn to fight for yourselves. Later, when she moved to the farm, she would come for every birthday she remembered. If she didn't come from the farm, she would send something. Every vacation she came down. The school used to close in December and open in March. So Ma would come in December and bring the Christmas for everyone, but she would sit us down and give each person $1. And I was slow. I just knew once I had that $1, life is good. I am the bomb for the week. And the following December, she would come back and say, what did you do with your $1? It took 3 years for it to finally dawn on me that this was economic empowerment. She wanted everyone who came back and say, I made $3, she gave you $3 extra. And one of the things we heard Ma say to us constantly, if your husband brings rice, you should be able to bring the charcoal to cook the rice. And growing up, it really we didn't think, because a lot of the young girls in our society were being socialized to get married to rich men and go to school, find a nice husband, have babies. But we were being socialized to be independent and to be our own people. That was the foundation of independence for me, or feminism for me, whatever word you want to use to describe my socialization as a child. And then we lived, so this is the first pillar of the foundation of my life. Then we live in a community that had about 13 of Liberia's 16 ethnic groups, and predominantly Christian and Muslim. It was a very close community. If you woke up in the morning and you went to take your neighbor's front push was probably someone's back push. That's how close it was. When your parent travel and you think you could be mischievous by bringing the boys to visit, as soon as they're coming on your push to touch the doorknob, you hear a male neighbor say, "Hey, where are you going?" And then we'll be standing, peeping through. Get back. The father or mother is not home. You can't go there. There was also accountability and responsibility to your community. The school used to close in December. They would give us our report cards. Every child had to go from house to house, regardless of what your final grades were. And you reach and say, "Good morning, Uncle. Here is my report card. I passed." They would open it up. If you did well, you got a quarter, a nickel, a dime, a dollar, depending on. If you did wrong, they smack you. If you didn't do well, imagine being smacked by 20 neighbors. If you didn't do well. And that was just the smacking of the neighbors. Then your dad had to come home to give you the ultimate smacking. So that was but then with all of the disciplining, there was the pleasure of community. We used to have frequent light off. And once the lights were out, electricity gone, all of the parents came and sat on their porches. And every time I close my eyes, that's the beauty. And someone will have a drum, and someone will have a sasa, and we will start traditional dances. Every home, as their parents sit there, you raise a song from your ethnic group, and everyone will join in the dancing. So it was that life that we weren't rich, but we were happy. It was peaceful. Children were children. If you had a celebration happening in one house, if the guests got too many, every other house opened their doors and the guests flowed over to the next house. All of a sudden, a war comes. And all of this stability that you've known forever is turned upside down. Society will protect the women and the children becomes a dream. Peace or peaceful coexistence between religious groups is a mist. Everything that you've ever been socialized to believe is taken away from you. I saw my life go from uphill to downhill, making choices that were not very good, got into a relationship, and in 5 years, I had 4 children. You know, every time I tell people I am so fertile that sometimes I don't shake very hard when I'm walking, afraid that a baby will drop from under my arm or somewhere, but it's true. Apparently, every time he winked at me, I was pregnant. We didn't have to go anywhere else. You know, so 5 children, it was an abusive relationship. My children could only call me stupid mama because that was the name he called me, stupid. But in my socialization, and this is for the young people in the room, in my socialization, I had come to recognize in my brain interactions between men and women that were unacceptable for me. So I had placed value on certain things. When we were growing up in the neighborhood, we had an uncle who used to beat his wife. And every time he would beat her, my dad would go and he and my dad would get into a fight. But then, not only would he beat her, he would stand and insult her. And I remember I would cry for her. And I'll tell my mom, why can't she leave him? Somewhere in my young mind, my brain had taken, at least the physical abuse is not bad, but my brain had rejected the verbal abuse. I don't know how that happened, maybe some psychologists need to help me understand. But the first time my kid's father insulted me publicly, that was the end of 5 years of abuse. They called family conference, they called this, they called that, and it was like something in my heart just died. And I was looking for the moment to leave. Finally, he realized that it's not working, it's never going to work. I hitchhiked from Ghana to Liberia with 3 children and 3 months pregnant. I got to Monrovia, and my dad was a very hard person. I call him my wounded drive. He would say things to you that would just tear you apart. And in that house, I remember my 3-year-old, who is now a junior at Mount Holyoke, never smiled as a child. And till today, she's still a very focused young woman. And she came one morning, had taken 3 bottles of pills. And I was lying in the living room chair, waiting for everyone to go, and I was going to take the pills and end my life. And this little girl came and stood in front of me with the most infectious smile. And I was like, what? And she said, I guess you just love us. And you know, if you did not have us, you'd probably be dead by now. But because you have us, that's why you're not dead. I started crying. And she hugged me. The first thing that came to my mind was, how do you get this together? That evening, and it was like God had, and I have a very strong faith in God. It's like He had ordained that moment of transformation. My mother came home, and I used to avoid them. And we had a conversation. She said to me, what do you want to do with your life? You know how your life is a mess and you don't want anyone to ask you about the mess that you've made of your life? Anybody been in that position before? So you duck. When you see that question coming, you duck. And that's how, have you all ever, oh, your lives have been so good. No one's been in that position where you've just messed up. I need to see hands, ladies. Good. You know you've just messed up and you know you've messed up. So every time you see that girlfriend of yours that is so blunt and honest, you duck. And when you see her number, her phone call, you say, I'm not ready for that reality conversation. We all try to avoid those, right? My mom took me off guard. We're cleaning the yard, burning leaves at night. It was starry. And then she asked me, what do you want to do with your life? Oh my God. I was looking for where to duck. And then she said to me, she said, you're smart. You're strong. You're powerful. You're going places. If you decide to go back to school, she took off her hair tie and tied her waist. She said, you see, I will stand behind you regardless of what it takes. The next week, I go to register to go back and get a degree in social work. And I begin to work my butt off. It's one step at a time, ladies. It's never automatic. It's not magic. No matter how hard you're falling, it's one step at the time. Young women, you're bound to fall. But it's how well you're able to pick yourself up, dust yourself off. But I remember sitting in my classes at the university and never saying a single word the entire semester. Students would be talking about my self-esteem was so low. It had taken a beat down, meltdown, kick down. There was nothing left. I would tiptoe into class, hoping that no one noticed me because I always felt there was something wrong with my dress. There was always something wrong with me. There was always something. And so we got this psychology term paper. I researched and researched and researched. And the old people have a saying that when it gets ready to rain, it pours. One child had malaria, one had diarrhea, another one had something else. And I'm writing paper on candlelight and taking care of 4 young bodies. I wrote this paper, look at the paper, and for the first time in many years, I felt good about my intellectual ability. When the test paper returned, I saw F. My heart broke. something in me said, this professor did not read this paper. I would take this step. That was a journey. One step at a time, shaking. I went to his office. Sir, you did not read my paper. Shaking. You saw my name, and because I've never participated in your class, you graded my paper on the basis of my name. What? Are you sure? I said, yes, sir. Give me the paper, go. I'll talk to you on Monday. It was a nerve-wracking weekend. Monday I went to class. After class, he summoned me into his office, handed me my paper, and said, you were right. I got an A minus. I left that room and told myself, until God calls me home, I will speak, and I will speak for myself. Gradually, I begin to find my voice. I will speak up on things. Started talking in class, bringing ideas that were coming to my head up. Graduated, top of one of the first 10 in my class with a 3.5 GPA. And I remember when they were handing me my diploma, the president of the college said, this is one student. If she didn't have 4 children and every other dirt being thrown at her, would have graduated with a 4-point GPA. I felt so good. But it wasn't a good feeling of graduating than looking at 4 children in the hall, hyper, and everyone who passed by them that day, they said, we are graduating today. My son Arthur, who's 19, will soon be 19, was the energy bunny. It's today I am graduating. And when people ask him how, he said, we used to help her do her homework. In that journey, I had been working with child soldiers, and all of the anger that had built up as a result of the war was still there. But I got to know these child soldiers in the 3 years of college and the 3 years of working on the basis that no textbook can tell you the mind of young killers. And what I realized, even as I was angry with the state of their lives and the state of what they've done to our communities, I realized that a lot of these children were victims of circumstances. Just as I felt like I was a victim of the war, these young children were also victims. So I begin to imagine for myself a life of activism and advocacy where we would target those individuals, men and women, who would use their resources to wage war. And that was the beginning of my coming into the peace movement. I had gotten a degree in social work, but I realized social work was not for me. And you know, every time I tell stories, I tell people, don't just listen to the stories, but listen to the lessons. So one of the first things that I've said this morning to you, or in this sense, this is a saloon, is that in my socialization, I was taught the value of independence, personal and economic independence. I was taught the value of unity in diversity. But I was also taught as I went along the way that you have to speak for yourself. When my grandmother told us that you needed to bring the charcoal that cooked the rice, she was in essence telling us, if you do not control your space, someone will come from outside and dominate your space. That was the lesson. The other lesson that I learned was that after social work school, everyone expected we'll go and find job working. I realized that this is not where my heart was. I didn't have the stomach for going to the orphanages because I love my children so much, and any kind of situation that had children suffering immobilized me. You have to know as a woman professionally what it is that gives you or keeps your adrenaline pumping. Most times we follow the wind. I'm not one of those to do trending, because trending is never the things that leave legacies. So then I started thinking about ways, and all of a sudden I get to meet these wonderful women who had stories to tell, and that began my journey of peace activism with a group of women. When we did 2 years of extensive work with these women, there's one other lesson that I learned. There's no way you can really be powerful in anything you do if you don't try to squeeze all of that dirt that you carry as a result of your life experiences. You have to find a place and a space to exhale. And most times for us girls, we never really do that. We carry it, whether you're an LA woman or you're a Liberian woman, everyone expects women to take all of the dirt. And when I talk about dirt, I'm talking about husband coming home and telling you, oh no, I have this shady boss, excuse my French. Children coming home and telling you bully, and you finding out that your child is doing some kind of substance, and your daughter is into this and that other thing. You know, all of the things, you absorb it in a way that the rest of your community do not. And for you to find yourself in a world of making change, you have to find a place where you squeeze everything out of you. And I'm not saying after you squeeze it out, you won't absorb. You have to also find ways of taking it out every now and then. Because when you want to step into your power and make changes, you can't do that with all those baggage hanging on you. This morning I woke up and I was having my own meltdown, and I called Jesus, listened to some gospel music in that hotel room. That's how I didn't go for breakfast. And then afterwards I pick up the phone and call my sister, and we talk about all of the things that you have to. Ladies, there is no life without a community. You must be able to establish. So when we started doing the peace work, every one of those women, we form a community. Oh my God, some of the things that we had to deal with to bring those women into their power were some of the things from as far back as when I was not even born. There was this older woman who, when she joined our peace movement, her community was upset. And a lot of the women in her community said, why did we include her in such a holy thing? One of the nights we did our circle process, and this woman decided to tell her story. Beautiful woman, married this man, and on the first night of their honeymoon, he could not get it up for her. And for 40 years, he could not get it up for her. She lived in that. Society, no one, she could not go out to tell anyone. And she said at some point in time, she got into a relationship and brought a child home. And the child became his child. And the two of them knew. But she said, I lived a life for 40 years. And this is the only space I think is safe for me to say it. And every time she went to the church, even from her youth, to say, I want to leave this marriage, they called her a bad woman. But once she was able to tell us that story, the transformation, she went for that divorce that should have happened 40 years ago, she started to live. The stories of women, and because I too had to sit down and tell the stories of days when I was hungry. And that was one of the most difficult stories to tell. That I was so hungry one day. I had to eat the leftovers of people's food. I felt like that story was the chain that was holding me back. And once I told it, we cried, we laughed. With the women, we did a whole lot of things, but we stepped into our power. Then we were able to transform our society. People, let's not deceive ourselves. In the global world, the US is fighting to bring peace to Iraq and peace to Afghanistan and peace. There will not be peace in any of those countries because this country has no peace. You have to be able to deal with your own baggage in order to deal with the baggages out there. And that's what we did as women. So when we stepped out and started protesting for peace, people started laughing, and Gandhi says they will laugh at you, they will mock you, and then they will join you. And that was our experience. We protested from embassy to embassy. We went in slippers and no slippers and white t-shirt, no all kinds of things. Our persistence and tenacity gave us peace after 9 months of protesting. When we got peace, we decided, do we want to go and sit down? No. We want to continue. So for 2.5 years, we continue our activism and our advocacy. Liberia got elected Africa's first female president. We had managed to get a law on the books against rape. We got a law for inheritance for women who married under customary laws. It's been a long journey to where I find myself. And if anyone had told me that little girl in the community who was slow in getting what $1 meant, that one day I would stand on the global stage and deliver something called a Nobel lecture, I would have told them they're lying. When I won the Nobel Peace Prize, I have a whole group of people that I love that sat around me and said, okay, let's talk about legacy. I'm 39. How do you begin to talk about legacy at 39? I thought you wait until you're 50 or 60. No, girlfriend, you have the Nobel Peace Prize. We have to start thinking about those things. I always look back at my life and find the shortcomings in every success. And so we look back, I sat down, did a tracking of everything that I've done. I realized that young people were left out of everything that we had done. So one of the things that I said to myself as a legacy, I want to continue to work with young people, providing educational needs. What I saw when I started, no one prepared me for. So we took a journey across Liberia, interacting with young girls. And we'll talk about the value of education, talk about the value of this. And a lot of these girls will say to you, I want to go to school, but I do not have the means. And you're telling me not to sell my body? What other options do I have? And I always say there's another way. I have one student who is now at a university here in the US as part of our foundation scholarship doing her master's in public policy. The first time I encountered this little girl, she said, I want to tell you the truth. I know education is my way out of poverty, but I also know that having sex with rich men is the only way I can get money to go to school. So I took her as my personal project, and I said to her, that's not the only way. There's always another way. When you have a narrow way of thinking, and you don't think outside of the box, you've always been taught a woman's body is desirable and sex is something that will give you whatever, think outside, there's another way. I took a trip out of Liberia for like 2 months, and every time I would see a missed call on my rooming phone from this little girl, and I would just put it off, I'll call her back. I went back home, she came to my office and said, Madam Gbowee, I need to talk to you right now. I said, sit down. She said, you always told me there is another way, and I always argued that it's difficult to find another way in this situation. She said, you left and I called you. It was time for my finals for her undergrad. I did not have the $500 to pay my school fees. I kept saying to myself, there's another way, there's another way, there's another way. She said, I went to my parents' house and took the deed of their property and took it to a pawn shop. I pawned their deed, paid my school fees, and kept saying to myself, there's another way. I heard about a company that was hosting this event that needed young, active people to help them organize. I went and did that work for 2 weeks, and they paid me $1,000. I got my parents' deed and put it back to the place. I have extra money, and you were right. There is always another way. When I see young people like that young woman who are inspired by this life that I've lived, I ask myself every day, who am I to give up when my travel schedule is hectic? Who am I to complain when things are not going right? But also when you have gotten such great gift from God, you want to ask yourself, what more can I do? So today, what do? I tell myself, one of the things I do and I find a lot of pleasure in is going into big spaces with very powerful men and making them uncomfortable. I am unapologetic about that. A few months back, I got invited to speak at Security Council. So, of course, my first go-to person is Abby, Miss Abs. I got something good to tell you. What, dear? I'm asked to speak at the Security Council. Oh, boy. I say, yes. So what are you going to say? I say, I don't know yet. She said, I get afraid when you tell me you're listening for what Jesus is going to tell you to say. She said, but you know what? You want to take it easy because you don't want to risk stepping on people's toes and then never inviting you back. I said, okay, let me ask you a hypothetical question. What if I risk treading easily and I say all of the politically correct thing and they never ask me to come back? And what if I say what is needed to be heard in this day and age and they still invite me to come back? She looked at me. I said, but even if we could take it further, what if I say all of the right things and as I leave that building, someone shoot me dead, then I did not have the opportunity to say. Anyway, I wrote my speech and told them I will not submit my speech for anyone to look at. I will give my speech when I get there. I sit next to the Russian ambassador. And that day, I was really, really sexy. My cleavage was... So I went in for trouble. My kids will say, Mama, you're shameless. Anyway, on a more serious note, I sat down and we talked about peace. And I gave my presentation. And then I said, before I leave this room, because I doubt if you all will ever ask me to come back, there's one more thing that I need to say. 50 years ago, when the UN was established, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council were colonizers. Check your history. 50 years later, the situation is not different. Why do we need 5 permanent members? Ban Ki-moon's eyes almost jumped out of the socket. Samantha Power, your US ambassador, was writing, and her pen got stuck in mid-air. The Russian ambassador looked at me and he turned pink. I said, the world needs, we're all crying for change. And in this UN, you're crying for change. But change will only come if we change some of those structures that have lost their significance in this day and age. Usually people do not clap at the Security Council. Someone tried to clap and then they cut themselves. But for me, this journey that I find myself on, the mother of 6 children who never once imagined that my kids would graduate college in this country, that I would stand here and interact with some of the most powerful women. Desmond Tutu said, Leymah, remember, it's never about you. It's about the hundreds and thousands, and back to the Maya Angelou quote, of women and young girls that you aspire to inspire. It's never about any one of us. It's about globally where we find ourselves. This world is upside down. It's about the thousands of girls that are trafficked every day. It's never about us. It's never about us in this room. It's about the number of homeless people and young women who are looking for older women just to hold their hands and say, you will do well. And so for me, it's not about me. It's not about the comfort of being a Nobel laureate. It's about going to South Sudan and sitting with the Sudanese women and saying to them, it is okay, peace will come. Just keep on keeping on. It's about taking some of the trips that the media have said is crazy, going to North Korea. But it's important to go, come out and say, this is what I saw and this is what I think should be changed. It's about going to Libya and standing in front of all of the powerful men and telling them, you sit here and say something terrible happened because you're too ashamed to call the word rape and mention rape 100 times and make them uncomfortable because that's what needs to happen in this world. It's never about you. And I've learned that it's never about me. It's not about how I look or how you feel about me or how uncomfortable it gets. It's about the call that is on my life to play my part, do what I can do to change the situation for a woman, for a girl, and even for a boy. We live in a time where people are so pessimistic about peace, about world order, about people doing good. And we're just looking, the times are crying out for people to raise their hands and say, I'm one of those people who will stand up when everyone else is afraid to stand up. I'll conclude with this story. I tell people I'm a very optimistic person. Sometimes I'm cautiously optimistic, but other times I'm always bubbly optimistic. And I moved to New York to do this Barnard teaching thing with all of my Africanness, my dress, my nosiness, my bossy attitude, everything. One of the days I'm going downtown to have a meeting, and I don't know why, but for some strange reason, my focus went on three black boys. And I'm a mother, and all mothers in this room have eyes like pineapple. It's all over our bodies. So I look at them, and then they walk into a nail salon. Okay. I'm still standing there, forgetting my meeting I was going to. These little boys came outside with a pair of slippers. It was interesting, even more interesting. I followed them and saw them, three black men. Just close your eyes and imagine three black young teenage boys. They walk over to this old white man who was finding it difficult to walk because the flip-flop he was wearing was broken. They bought him a flip-flop and gave it to him. The African in me started dancing. I ran to those little children and hugged them, and they were confused. I said, thank you. Tell your mothers they brought up good young men. And because I'm crazy, I go back home doing my own analysis of the situation and ask myself, how many thousands of us adults passed that old man and did not pay attention? How many of us, how many opportunities have we had to do good and to just create hope in someone that this world is not as bad as it looks? My son tells me one day, I'm going to the store to buy a jacket. Nuku, why do you need another jacket? You just bought a jacket, and the price tag can send 10 children to school in Africa. Mama. There is this student who came from the Palestine to my school, and the winter was terrible, and he see this boy walking outside, and he followed him and said, dude, you would die without a winter coat. And he has on track suit and turns to my son and say, this is all I got. I said, so Nuku, what you did? He said, I took off this jacket and gave it to him and said, you can have it. I said, Nuku. And he said, Mama, are you upset? Isn't that what you taught us? I said, I'm not upset, I'm touched. It's never about us people. It's about those thousands of girls in LA right here who need a space like this to reaffirm that they live in a world where there are decent women who would look out for them. It's never about us. This journey that I find myself on has never been about me and how comfortable I get or how I feel. That's why I leave here tonight. I have an 8 a.m. event in New York. Then I go to DC. Then I fly to Nairobi, come back, do 1 day in New York, go to China, North Korea, and South Korea, come back, go to Barcelona, come back, and go to some other place, Arusha, Tanzania. It's never about me. We all have attacks, and I'm happy that you all, Angela and her team, your sisters, have started Visionary Women, because this is what we are called to do in this day and age. Vision the change that we want to see. This is what I do on a day-to-day basis. What do I want to see happen? And my staff say once I wake up with those ideas, then everyone else's life is in a turmoil because we have to make it happen. People, these are difficult times. We all live in fear. We wonder what kind of world we're going to leave our children with. These young girls who have come from their different high schools sometimes wonder what world we're going to leave with them. All is not lost. If my life story is an inspiration to any of you, then each and every one of us have a story in this grand story of the world to make a difference. Eleanor Roosevelt once said, do one thing that will scare you. But I leave you with a quote that I've used out of Eleanor Roosevelt quote. Do one good thing every day that everyone else is scared to do. Thank you.
What a distinct honor and pleasure it is to listen to you, Ms. Gbowee. And we would like to open up the forum for any questions that you may have. We have 10 minutes allotted for questions, please.
Ask anything, even about my love life. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for your beautiful contribution. How can we support you in your vision? How can we in Los Angeles, in our communities, there are many women here who have big communities, how can we step up, and what action can we take to support you in what you're doing?
There's a lot we all can do to change the world. I have always come to places like California, and I'll stay in my hotel because this is the only time I have to relax since I'm on the go. I was in San Francisco and I had time on my hands, so I decided to move around. And one of the things that struck me was the number of mentally ill people on the streets of San Francisco. I felt like I was in another world. The number of homeless people. And a few years back, I was at the home of one of the very powerful people in Silicon Valley, and I got asked this same question, and I said, I would love to see people reach out to the inner city of their cities. I met Abby Disney, and she wanted to do a documentary of the work that I had done. She did her documentary. It got good reviews. But even before the documentary got reviews, when she stepped into my world, the first thing she said to me was, Leymah, you can't transform the world if we do not transform your children. We need to create opportunities for these children. That has been a lesson for me, that in transforming this world, I have to also transform my community. Because success is not measured by the number of people that you meet out there. Your success is measured by how successful the ones close to you become, or how they feel, or how they've tasted your success. So I would like to see from here, and there are very beautiful, innovative things happening. I travel around this country, and sometimes I say to myself, you know, the young people gave me so much hope. I met a group of 10-year-olds from New Mexico. 10-year-olds. So they're probably 12 now, 2 years ago. They started something called Hook on Books. This little 10-year-old said, Miss Leymah, you know why we started this organization of ours? I said, no, ma'am. I was listening to the news one day when our governor said, if you do not read by 3rd grade, you get left behind. I was upset and appalled, and she used all kinds of terms to describe how she felt. How do you do that when 80% of our community are migrants who came and English is not their first language? It means you're going to leave all of my friends behind. And you know what, Miss Leymah? No, ma'am. They have no programs for these kids to learn to read. So I went to school, told my friends, told my teachers, and we decided to start something called Hook on Books. So what is Hook on Books? These little girls and boys put books in every public space that parents spend their time. So if you go to the doctor's office, they have a reading area. In the grocery store, in their little town, they have a reading area. Everywhere that adults will be busy, they put there. And during the vacation, they ask young people to volunteer and come and teach children to read. That is one of my favorite, all-time favorite projects. You can do that. You can support some work outside. Our thing now, we take money from global giving from our foundation, because if you go there and read about our African Girls Leadership Initiative, it costs like $300, $500, $200 to send girls to school. And most times I challenge Liberian women. I say, that handbag that is going to cost $250 is a school fees for a girl. We run youth camp. That's one of my most pleasurable time, where the inner child in me comes out. I go back home every July and do youth camp for over 50 kids. This year I'm doing it for kids post-Ebola. So we're going to sit down, talk about life after Ebola with these young children. You can do many things to support my work, but you can do many things to also support global peace. And one of the things that you could also do is to just begin to talk to your government to end some of the violence that is happening around the world. Fire, when we say fire is in this room, the firefighters come. What they use to put out the fire is not fire in a hose, it's water. Going to use violence to end violence is like using fire to fight fire. We need to begin to have a conversation about changing that. Another thing that people need to do is to begin to have dialogues in your communities. There's a huge racial tension in this country right now. There's a need, I tell people it's need for Americans to talk about civil rights, But it's time to move beyond civil rights and begin to have conversations in this country about human rights. Because that's where the problem is. Civil rights is neat. Human rights is messy, because human rights would challenge the inner being of this community, of this society, to begin to look at your economic policies, your social policies, and all of the policies that tend to leave one group behind while bringing the other group forward. And I think there is a pivotal role for women to play in having this conversation. Today, Los Angeles has not gone to the place where you have police and a minority group having problems. But I think it is important for the women in this community, maybe visionary women, to begin to have conversations with the police wives. How do you feel when your husbands are out there? With the Black and Latino mothers, how do you feel when your sons are out there? Bring the groups together to begin to have conversations. How can we begin to engage our husbands and our sons and our boys and our men for peaceful relationships in our community? Some communities need to be proactive rather than reactive. That's the way we can help. I think I can take one more and then.
I want to know about your love life. How would you?
Girl, I am married to one of the most handsome and sexiest 52-year-old in the world. And trust me, we do have a The love life is good. It took many years of trial and error to get to where I find myself. I remember the first time I introduced this current husband to my sister. She said, "This is the man for you. This man is solid. He's not intimidated by your success." And for young people, that is what is important. Most times I go to college campuses and some of my nieces, the little girls who have become my nieces, will say they have to play dumb to be able to date. And I say, girls, if he is dumb, even your dumb will not meet his dumb. If he doesn't get it, there is nothing that you say that even if you brought yourself down to kindergarten level, if he's dumb, he's dumb. Do not minimize yourself for any man. To the young people in this room, don't. You will find someone, trust me, who will not be intimidated by your going forward and moving forward. I had someone in my life who supported me for 10 years. As soon as I got my master's, he sent me an email to say, we're no longer at the same level. At least he was honest. I tried to make it work, it couldn't work. That's why I'm saying, even if you become dumb, they will still be dumb. So I tell young people, especially young girls, be comfortable in your skin. Even if the trending, let me tell you something, girls, trending, in vogue, those things that are fashionable now, never leaves legacy. Be the odd one. Be the one who focuses on your self-development and where you think you're going with your career. 20 years later, they will see you with that person that is supposed to be for you. If you're focusing, then you have a career and you have this man. A lot of my friends ask me, how did you get lucky? 5 kids later, you find this handsome, fine man. I say, well, I wasn't looking. And I wasn't looking so hard. Even when it came my way, I didn't even see it because I was too busy focusing on other things. So most times I tell young girls, don't try to follow trending. My students at Barnard say to me sometimes, in other places I go to speak, you're a laborer, but you're controversial. Because I have constantly asked them about the hookup culture, where you just go and meet a guy and have sex like you're drinking beer. So one of the scenarios I've been giving them is, what if you become the Secretary of State of the United States of America? After your inauguration or induction into office, you're going somewhere, your driver is one of your regular hookups when you were in college. You know, think about it. So I tell young people, so the law of life is great, but the law of life, there is an understanding in my law of life that I'm never ever going to make myself small to make you big. That's it. Thank you, people.